Mark chapter 8, verses 31 to 33. Here's what we read. And he, being Jesus, began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he was stating the matter plainly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning around and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's. All right, so this is where everything changes in Mark's gospel. Everything up to chapter 8, verse 30 has all been uphill, all pointing to one thing, that Jesus is the Christ. All right? He heals people. He does all these things. That's great. Now, everything from Mark 8:31 on is a slow, deliberate march to the cross for Jesus. And we see it. It starts in verse 31. He lays out his mission clearly, plainly, painfully clearly. That's what he's doing. And this is why the entire Gospel of Mark literally hinges right here. Verse 30 up to here, here's the Christ. Verse 31, here's what it means for me to be the Christ. Okay? It's literally at the center. And what we find out is that just like Mark told us the story of Jesus healing that man with blindness a little progressively, that he was fuzzy, now he can see. This is what we see literally lived out in the disciples' lives. They get that he's a Christ, but they really are kind of fuzzy about what that means. And when Jesus states the matter plainly, look, he says, it literally says, verse 32, he stated the matter plainly. He comes in and he absolutely lays it all out. Guys, here it is. What happens? Peter takes him aside and rebukes him. Okay. This is one of those times where things have taken an odd turn. The one who says, you're the Christ, he doesn't understand what it means. Now when Jesus tells him what it means, he gets upset. And here's the thing. Peter thinks he understands what it means for Jesus to be the Christ. He thinks it means conquering king who's going to come and liberate Israel and everything's going to be great. That's what Peter has in mind. And Jesus says, yeah, that's not the one I'm coming to be. I'm coming to be the one who's going to suffer, be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, be killed, and rise again from the dead. That's who I am. Peter thought, hey, if Jesus is conquering king, I get to be part of that. If Jesus is suffering servant, I get to be part of that. I think that's why Peter is really not so happy about what Jesus says. Hey, don't say that. Don't talk like that. And look what he says. Jesus says, and it's not, by the way, it's not just Peter thinking this. Peter's just the one who has the audacity to try to rebuke Jesus. He looks around, he sees his disciples. It's almost like he looks around, he sees all of them like, yeah, and like, don't talk like that, Jesus. And he rebukes and says, get behind me, Satan. And why does he say that? Because, Peter, your mind is not on what God's mind's on. You're looking at the external, at what you get out of it, out of all these things. If I get to be conquering king, you get to be the one who rides in with me. That's not who I am right now. I will come as conquering king, but not right now. And so he says, your mind is fully set on man's interest. What does it benefit you? But God's interest is where my mind is. And here's what I'm concerned about. I'm going to die. I've come to die. Ultimately, we know he's come as the Christ to die for the sins of the world. That's the point. And so Peter's not prepared for that. It takes him by surprise. And now what we have to understand is everything from now until the end of the gospel is all about Jesus' slow, deliberate march to the cross. So, what does this tell us about Jesus? It tells us he has a very clear understanding of who he is and what he's coming to do. He knows what's about to happen, and he's intent to follow through. What does this tell us about ourselves? It tells us we can be very self-centered. We can even try to make Jesus about us. And Peter, that's not what you really want to be remembered for, but the reality is it's part of your life. You try to make the gospel about you, and we can be just as guilty. So what's it call us to do? Well, it calls us to set our minds on God's interest. What does God want to do? It's His world, His plan. We're here to follow. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much. Join me back here tomorrow. Another great text as we dig into what this means, what this calls us to as people who follow Jesus Christ. Thank you so much. I will see you back here tomorrow as we hop back in